Good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are joining us. My name is Erik Anderson. I am the Chief Architect and owner of the Orion scoring system and also Athena. And today you're joining us for a live webinar of Athena's MM100 Spectator Display, and this is going to be a technical overview of its functionality. I'm joined today with Ben Wolin, who is the lead programmer who developed the MM100 functionality. Now, some logistics to get started. Today's webinar is going to be about 45 minutes, and it is meant to be a technical overview of the MM100. The first half of it will be more high-end and more relevant to all of our customers. The second half will get a lot more technical about how you can configure the MM100 for your own specific club's needs. Now, as we go through, if you have questions, please use the YouTube live chat box to submit your questions. We have moderators who are standing by who will either be able to answer your questions within the chat box or hold those questions until the end of the presentation, where we will have a live Q&A session. Now, questions outside of the scope of the MM100 will have to be referred to our support helpline. We simply don't have the time today to answer general questions about Orion or Athena. Now, one thing to note as we go through today's presentation, some of the slides that you see, some of the functionality that you're going to see, we haven't released yet to the production version of Orion and Athena, but we do expect to do that within the next week or so. So just be aware that if you're trying to replicate what you're seeing on your current version of Orion or Athena, it's not quite yet available. And I do want to give a special thanks to, first and foremost, our customers. Your willingness to be patient with us, your adoption of Athena a lot faster than I anticipated really means a lot to me. And like I said, I really do appreciate your patience as we are scaling up our production capacity to fulfill your orders. And it's kind of a thank you for your patience. We are providing a complimentary MM100 to all of our pre-order customers. For those of you who we have already sent Athena to, you should have received a second package with the MM100. For those of you who we are fulfilling your orders between now and the future, we're just going to include that MM100 with your order. And I also want to give a special thank you to three individuals who shared their ideas about a modern spectator display with us when we were starting the development. Those individuals were Brad Donahoe and Vicki Harrington from the Civilian Marksmanship Program, and Roy McLean from Old Mill in Georgia. I also want to give a thank you to the two developers who worked on this project. First, James Jackman came to us out of Texas. He's a West Virginia University student. He interned with us last summer. He did a lot of the groundwork for the MM100. And then Ben Wolin, who, as I mentioned a moment ago, was the lead programmer on the MM100 and spent the last couple of months really doing a great job in putting together its functionality. Now, today's agenda is going to have 5 parts to it. First, it's going to just kind of an overview of the MM100, a very high-level overview. Then we're going to talk about the out-of-the-box experience that you're going to get with the spectator display. And while it doesn't require a lot of configuration for the out-of-the-box experience, it does require some. And we're going to talk about what you need to do to get that out-of-the-box experience. And then finally, the last 2 sections is where things are going to get technical. And the MM100 while it has a great out-of-the-box experience, there's a lot more functionality to it that you can access. But to access that functionality requires a higher level of technical expertise, and with it, knowledge on how to configure it. And there's 2 different ways of configuring it, either through a GUI, through Orion, or to access even the more detailed, higher level of functionality through JSON configuration files. So with that, let's get started. The next statement I'm going to make is going to be probably the weirdest but truest statement you hear me make all day. The MM100 Spectator Display is the most important part of your EST system, which might seem a bit controversial because you might be thinking that the target that actually scores the shots is the most important part. But I'm going to make the argument that it's actually the MM100, and that's because the Spectator Display shows the action of the sport. It lets people who are watching the match, your spectators, know who's winning, who's losing, by how much they have to move up, who's doing well, who's not doing well. That's all part of the functionality of the spectator display. And the reality is, when you have spectators come into your range during a competition, they're going to spend more time watching the spectator display than they are going to be watching the athletes. Now, the MM100 success, and you probably can tell by the excitement in my voice, I'm really excited about it, comes from the fact that we got ideas from you, the athlete, the coaches of the shooting sports. And the people who were programming it, Ben and James, they're both athletes themselves. The MM100 was designed by shooters. And then, of course, we're developing this for you. Again, the coaches and the athletes. So all of your ideas we took, we're athletes ourselves, and we put it back into the sport. And we're very excited about that, and we hope you are as well. Physically, the MM100 is just a small black box. That's inside of the small black box is hiding inside a Linux computer. That's it. That's all there is to it. And it is part of the Athena EST system. So it does communicate with the network manager. It will get a lot of its information from both the targets and from Orion. And of course, it communicates over the Athena Wi-Fi network. So when you get the MM100, you have to make sure that it's set up to communicate with your Wi-Fi network. And it will work with any HDMI TV. The TV is sold separately. And it's powered by a 2.5 amp power supply using micro USB. And there's two different ways that you can power it. Either using a standard wall socket power cord or through a USB port. And we provided this second option, the USB port, because a lot of modern TVs will have a 2.5 amp power supply USB port on them. Certainly the TVs that we sell here at Orion have that option. So when you're setting it up, it's just one last power socket extension cord that you have to worry about. Now, before I go into the functionality, I do want to emphasize the shared responsibility each of us have in making sure that your range runs smoothly. And this is a shared responsibility. We each have a role to play. Here at Shooters Technology, we're responsible for developing the system. We're responsible for making sure that the software and the hardware work correctly. That's on us. We're also responsible for documenting Orion and Athena. We spent a lot of time over the last month, and we will continue to do so to provide you that documentation so you know how to use it. And we're also responsible to help teach you how to use the system. This webinar, for example, is part of our responsibility to teach you. Conversely, though, you as the club officials, you as the match directors, you as the statistical officers also have a responsibility that you need to take to heart. You're responsible for knowing how to use Orion and Athena. You need to take the time to learn how to use it. And if you want to configure it, you need to take the time to learn how to configure it correctly. That's part of your responsibility. And you're also responsible for maintaining your equipment. That means both updating the software and, for Athena, maintaining the mechanical systems in good working order. And of course, you're also responsible for knowing your rulebook. In short, we're responsible for providing the tools. You're responsible for knowing how to use them. Now, this next slide talks about a new software model that we're adopting here at Orion, trying to balance flexibility with the development time necessary to create that flexibility in the system itself. And this comes about because, over the last 10 years, as I've been talking to, the coaches and leaders of the sport, one thing has come up time and time again. You want lots and lots of flexibility in Orion and Athena. And that diversity in the sport is a great and wonderful thing. The problem is, in order to provide a software solution that meets that flexibility becomes cost prohibitive very quickly because there is so much diversity. And that model just breaks very quickly if we try to do it purely from a software perspective. So what we're adopting is kind of this three-tiered layers of customization and configuration. And the first tier, and you can see this with the MM100, is kind of an out-of-box experience that we program here at Orion that you have to do very little to configure. And it's a good out-of-the-box experience. It's going to be able to meet about 6% of our customers' needs. And again, you don't have to have a lot of technical knowledge to access this out-of-the-box experience, and it's going to meet most of your needs. But, again, many of you told me you want more flexibility. So the second layer, it's going to require some technical skill on your part. But we are providing the GUI configuration layer, GUI configurations within Orion, to kind of meet those needs, that needs of that middle 20%. But then there's also some of you who really want to get down and dirty and customize Orion, customize Athena for your specific needs. And that's great. But in order to provide that, we simply don't have the development time to do so. So instead, the trade-off is you can start composing JSON configuration files for your own customizations. And again, you're going to see that here with the MM100. So kind of sum it up, at the top tier, easy to use, good out-of-the-box experience, is going to meet most of your needs, most of our customers' needs. Then you can go into more technical detail and customize it for your own specific needs, and even going into the very low level of Orion's and Athena's configuration files to customize it to basically anything that you want. With that, let's start talking about the out-of-the-box experience you're going to get with the MM100. Now, the MM100 is built off of what we call display entities, and there's 4 to choose from. They are the athlete display, which is the live target images coming from each firing point. There is the ranked list and squatting list, which, as the name sounds, should be self-evident as to what they do. And then the fourth one, the one I'm most excited about, is image display, which allows you to display any image that you want to on the spectator display. And we're going to talk more about that in a few slides. So if you're one of the top 60% we talked about who just is going to go with the out-of-the-box experience, the next couple of slides we're going to talk about that experience that you get. It comes pre-configured with Orion, with Athena. You really have to do very little to get this out-of-the-box experience. Now, again, in the next couple of slides, for those of you who want to configure the system for your own specific needs, we're going to very quickly highlight the configurations options you have with these 4 display entities. First up, we have the athlete display entity. And as mentioned, this is, in effect, is the live target images coming from each firing point. One display can support up to 16 firing points. If you have more than 16 firing points, though, it rotates between the first half and then shows a new screen showing the second half of the firing points. Now again, that's the out-of-the-box experience. For those of you who are interested in the different options you have to configure this on your own, we first have the result list. So you'll see a little circle at the top left of each of the boxes. That's the rank of the athlete for this particular match, and it is live. And you can choose the second option to show the ranking by average shot fired or by accumulated shots. And then we have a third option for shot presentation. Do you want to show all the shots? Do you want to show the last 5? Do you want to show the last 10? That's one option. And then you can actually further limit the number of firing points on a display. The second display entity is one we call the ranked list, which again shows the ranking of athletes during a competition. Now, the out-of-the-box experience when you are running a competition is that it's going to show the ranking by average shot fired. And then after the qualification is done, it's going to show the ranking by aggregate score. And we got a few tricks up our sleeves with this ranked lists. So not only do we have the capability of showing ranks by average shot fired, we also have a new feature which you see all the way on the right-hand side that shows the difference between athletes, like how many points is second place from first place. And this gets amortized based on the entire course of fire. And then you can actually show multiple ranked lists, and the out-of-the-box experience is going to show the ranked list for the most important matches. So this is typically like in a 3-position match, your sporter individual, your precision individual, your sporter team, and your precision team ranked lists. So again, that's the out-of-the-box experience. For those interested in configuring this for your own needs, you have a couple options. One, you can specify any ranked list within Orion to show on the spectator display, or multiple ranked lists for that matter. And you can also have the option of only showing athletes on the current relay, or show all athletes from all relays. And of course, one of the most innovative ones is sort by average. So you can sort by average shot fired or by accumulated score. Both options are available to you. The third display entity is called squatting lists. And the out-of-box experience during a competition is it shows the firing points that the athletes are on before the competition starts. So athlete walks into the range, they can look up at the display and they know where to put their equipment down. And again, for those of you who want to configure this for your own needs, you have a couple options. You can limit the squatting list to just a specific relay. You can limit the squatting list to certain firing points. And you also have the capability of either show this as a scrolling list or multiple displays. The fourth one, as I mentioned, is quite possibly the one I'm most excited about, and we call it the image display. And at first sight of this, you might see this as some type of weird marketing opportunity for Athena. It isn't. It's a lot more powerful. What image display allows you to do is display any image to spectators during the course of the match. And think about some of the ideas that you could do. If your school has a logo or a flag, you can display that. If your club has a logo, you can display that. If you have sponsorships, you can display advertisements from those sponsorships. Or you can even take photos with your phone during the match and upload them and display those photos on the display itself. Now, the configuration for the image display is part of that middle layer, that GUI configuration, and we will talk about how to do that in a few slides. But again, for those who want the lowest level of configuration, some of the options that you have, the first is what we call the image key. We have different image keys that link a series of images. And again, we'll talk about that, what that means in a few slides. And then we have different ways of showing the images itself. How, do they get fit to the sides? How do they get fit? Do they get stretched? And we also, if you have multiple images, how we will display those multiple images for you. On this slide, you're going to start to understand the potential the image display entity has for the shooting sports. I'm very excited to announce that we have teamed up with my father, Gary Anderson. Perhaps you've heard of him. He once had a career in the shooting sports. To provide a series of slides covering two topics, athlete education and spectator education. And again, both of these are going to be part of the out-of-the-box experience you're going to get with Orion and Athena. The athlete education slides are going to be displayed during practice, and it's going to be on subjects such as gun safety, the fundamentals of shooting, and even training tips. And then during competition, my father's going to be working on a set of slides for spectator education. So the spectators who come into your range, they're going to be a little bit more educated about the sport itself and what it is that they're watching, including slides on the history of shooting and shooting in the Olympic Games. And again, this is going to be part of the out-of-the-box experience you're just going to get with Orion and Athena. The final piece of the out-of-the-box experience you're going to get with Athena is something that is only available with Athena. And that is the top and bottom strips. And the top strip is the match information during a competition, the match name and the range timer. And the bottom strip is a marquee that the out-of-box experience has pre-configured certain marquee messages such as athletes come to the firing line, or you can actually override the marquee for any message that you want to display. And again, that's all part of the out-of-the-box experience. So with that, let's now talk about how you configure the out-of-the-box experience. As I mentioned before, there isn't a lot of configuration that you have to do to get that out-of-the-box experience, but there is some. So let's go over that very quickly. First, especially for those of you who purchased the MM100 separately, or we shipped the MM100 separately to you, you have to re-download the what we call the Orion configuration files that lets Orion know that, hey, you actually have a spectator display to communicate with. And the way that you do that is through Orion's menu. You click on Athena and then re-download Athena configuration files. And again, what those configuration files are, you don't really have to edit it. All they're doing is telling Orion, hey, you have the spectator display modules. Go ahead and start talking to them. So you click on it, it will download, and then Orion will restart. And when you restart, on the range control tab and that bottom third section, you actually see your spectator display options. And the next thing you have to do after you download those configuration files is to assign firing points to each display. By default, firing points 1 through 8 are assigned to each spectator display, which is probably not necessarily what you want. So in order to assign specific firing points to a display, in the range control tab, double-click the row representing the display, and then in the box that pops up, you only have to worry about the field that says firing points. Just type in the firing points that you want assigned to that display. That's it. That's all you have to do. The last piece of the out-of-the-box experience you may want to configure is the marquee message. And that marquee is the bottom strip that you see on the spectator display. It comes pre-configured with certain messages during the course of an event, athletes call to line, it says the signing period, and so forth. But let's say you wanted to override that marquee message to something like, I don't know, say you're really excited about the University of Kentucky's, my alma mater's, third NCAA championship a few weeks ago. So what you would do is you click on Override Marquee Message, type in the words Go Big Blue, as one does, and then click on Save. And in a few seconds, that message, Go Big Blue, is going to show up on your range on all the spectator displays. All right, so that was the out-of-the-box experience. And now these next few sections, as I mentioned, is going to start to get technical, and I'll understand if some of you want to drop off. Perfectly fine. But as I mentioned, for those of you who want to configure the spectator display for your own specific needs, these next few sections are going to become increasingly important. Again, a warning, also become increasingly technical, but that's the trade-off that you get. So the first part of the GUI configuration layer that I'm going to talk about is how you can upload your images to get displayed. And you do have to understand one concept with the display images, is that instead of like displaying directly a image, you're actually displaying images that are linked to a image key. And you can change out those images associated with the image key anytime that you want. It's one of the reasons why it makes it so powerful. So for example, at the start of a competition, we display the range logo, and you can associate the range logo through Orion's configuration, GUI configuration, with your school or club's logo. In this particular case, the image I have here is from my high school, West Potomac High School. And then towards the end of the competition, we display an image key called Match Images. And you can upload images, again, via Orion, a series of images. It doesn't have to be just one. You can actually do up to 8 images associated with that image key. And then those images get rotated at the end of the match. The way that you do this through the GUI is, again, in Orion, click on, from the menu bar, Athena, and then edit a display image key file. And then this new menu will pop up. And what you want to do, because the one that comes default with Orion is called Athena Default, and you can't edit that particular file. So you want to go ahead and create your own file, and there's a menu option to do that. And then there's a series of image keys, and there's a drop-down list that you can select which image key you want to edit. And then the buttons on the left, add and remove image files. You can go and select the images to associate it with an image key from your operating system. When you click on Save, what's going to happen is Orion is going to upload those images to your network manager. Now, part of that is you have to know your login credentials to the network manager. You have to share that with Orion so Orion can communicate with the network manager in that way. Your login credentials we gave to you in what we call the customer information sheet, and we'll have the login credentials for things like your Athena network, your router, but also your network manager. So that's what you want to type in. So Orion will upload the images to the network manager, and then the EST display units download them from the network managers to display on screen. And the out-of-the-box experience, we actually have 5 different image keys that you can use. Athena Default, Range Logo, Club Images, Athlete Education, and Spectator Education. You can actually, when you get to the lower levels of the configuration, you can add your own image keys that if you really wanted to. One of the technologies that we built into the MM100 is what we call display automation. And what that is, at kind of a human level, during a course of fire, there are certain events that happen. For example, athletes are called to the line. The sighting period starts. The sighting period ends. Record firing starts. Record firing ends. And a lot more. And again, at a human level, we kind of understand what those events are. And but what we did, and this technology did, is we actually quantified those events. And we actually defined about 50 different display events. And if you look at the link that we provide in the bottom left-hand side, you can actually get a list of all those events that are available to you. Now, these display events are actually written into the Course of Fire range script. Unfortunately, the Course of Fire range script is part of a technology that we call the reconfigurable rulebook, and it's just simply out of scope for this presentation. But it is something that you can author yourself. And when you're authoring the Course of Fire range script, you as the author, by convention, will put in the display events throughout the script. And any one particular range script will probably only use 10 or 12 of the 50 different display events that we have available. And again, it's the author's choice, and it's by convention. So what happens at a practical level is as the range officer, the chief range officer, is going through the course of fire, and he or she does that via Orion's range control tab, that will trigger automatically these display events. And when a display event is triggered, that sends a message to the MM100 to change what we call the view configuration, and the view configuration is in essence the list of display entities to show. So let's go ahead and take kind of a graphical view of what I just said. So let's pretend for a moment that you are the range officer, and during a course of fire, during competition, you control the range through Orion's range control tab. And as you're advancing through the script, you're clicking that next command button. That will trigger at certain times what we call display events. And when you trigger a display event, you'll notice in the bottom third of the range control tab, the displays will update to the new display event. And that will trigger through what we call a mapping file, a new view configuration. And that's step number 3 I have here. And the view configuration, again, that's part of the low level configuration, but we have a lot of pre-configured view configuration options available to you that you can just use out of the box. And that view configuration lists the display entities with their options to show on the screen itself. And then the displays use this view configuration and changes what actually gets displayed to the spectators. As I mentioned a moment ago, Orion comes with its own set of predefined view configuration files. And matter of fact, the out-of-box experience that we talked about, in the previous slides, uses those predefined view configuration files. And they're there. You can actually look at them if you want to. And Orion also comes with 2 predefined what we call event assignment mapping files. So the event assignment mapping files maps the display events that we just talked about with a view configuration. And you can change up that mapping as much as you want. And you don't have to, at this layer, create your own view configurations. You can just use the ones that come with Orion. And by the way, we will be authoring more predefined view configuration files in the future. So this option is actually become a little bit more powerful as Orion and Athena progress. So again, you can create your own mapping file. You do that through the GUI configuration. And the next step is once you've defined your own mapping file for event assignments, you can actually assign different mapping files to different displays for different types of competitions. Practice, qualification, finals, or you can just change it for the current assignment. Now, each display does have its own mapping, so you could, for example, have one display that all it does is show images. You could have another display that all it does is show result lists. And you can have another display that all it does is show the target images for firing points, 10 through 13. But that's up to you, and this is part of that configuration options that you have at this level. The last section that we're going to talk about today is this JSON file configuration layer. This is both the most technical part of the session, but it is also the part where when you master it, you'll be able to configure the MM100 for basically any of your needs. So let's see how this works. In order to compose your own JSON configuration files, you have to understand kind of like the building blocks of how it works. So we're going to talk about like each of these 4 layers, the 4 building blocks to compose your own configurations. At the very bottom is the display entities. And if you recall back at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about the 4 different display entities that we have. And these are actually programmed into Orion. You can't author your own display entities, at least not yet. They're just part of Athena. Again, the 4 options are the athlete display, image display, result list, and squatting list. And the link at the bottom of this page will actually take you to our documentation about the 4 display entities and the options you have available for them. The next layer up is what we call view definitions. At a human level, a view definition is just a screen that the EST display, the MM100, shows at any one particular time. But more of a technical level, what a view definition is, it names a specific display entity that you want to show, and it provides the options to go along with that display entity. So for example, if you want to show a result list with a specific name, you can do so, and you can tell in the view definition whether to sort by aggregate or by average shot fired. And the other thing that you can do with a view definition are options to show the top match information strip or the bottom marquee strip. Those are all options available to you. And to make it generic, to allow for a bit of abstraction, you don't always have to specify the specific result list that you want to show. Instead, we have what we call replace attributes for result lists or result lists that Orion will fill in for you based on the type of match that you're running. So if you're running a 3-position match, it would replace, if you're using this option, with supporter individual, position individual, supporter team, and precision team. Or if you don't want that, you don't have to use replace attributes, and you can just specify whichever result list that you want to show. So let's see what this looks like in an actual file. What this looks like, again, it's a JSON configuration file. It's a text file, and we specify the view name, and the view name does have to be unique. The entity that you want to show, in this case, result list, and then the configuration for that result list display entity. In this particular case, we're saying by relay is true, so we only want to show athletes on the current relay, and we want to show them based on the average shot fired. From the third to bottom line, we're actually using the generic option here to allow Orion to fill in the name of the result list, and the most important result list for that particular match that you're running. And in this particular example, the bottom 2 lines say, yes, go ahead and show me that top match information strip, and show me the bottom marquee information strip. Now the next layer up is what we call the view configurations. And a view configuration, again, kind of at a human level, it actually combines multiple view definitions. And the options that you have available at the view configuration level is which view definitions to show and for how long to show them. And there's also an option for the default marquee message just to display. So this is what a view configuration JSON file looks like. Again, the configuration name has to be unique, and then you combine multiple view definitions. In this particular example, I'm combining the Athena athlete display, and we're going to show that for 60 seconds, with the Athena result list by average display that we're going to display for 30 seconds. And then our default marquee message is simply, may the best athlete win. The top layer building block is what we call event assignments. And you'll recall we actually did talk about the event assignment in the GUI configuration layer. And at a human level, once again, what an event assignment mapping is the mapping between the display event, which is defined by the course of fire, and which view configuration to show when that display event happens. So it's basically the when a view configuration is shown. All right, and this is what the JSON file looks like. And you actually kind of see the, even if you're not familiar with JSON, you can actually see how this mapping looks like in a text file. On the left-hand side, you have the display event, and on the right-hand side, you have the view configuration name. I know the overview I just went through was actually a pretty quick one. Probably didn't do justice to everything that one would need to know to compose your own configuration files at that lowest level. Quite frankly, we just didn't have time to go into all the detail that would otherwise be necessary. So for those of you who are interested, let's go talk about what you need to do to get started and how you can pick up that added knowledge to go ahead and compose your files. First, you're going to need a good text editor, to be perfectly honest. Windows by itself doesn't come with a good text editor. Notepad is a terrible text editor, to be perfectly honest. And Microsoft Word isn't a text editor, it's a document editor. Those are two different things. So you're going to want to invest in your own text editor. We here at Choose Technology use one that's called Sublime. There's, 100 billion other text editors out there. Use the one that you like. They're both free and paid ones, but you are going to want to go ahead and invest in a good text editor. Second, you want to spend some time learning JSON. Again, JSON is a well-known text format for data. If you're graduating this year in computer science, you know JSON. And if you don't know JSON, it's not too bad. It's actually pretty easy to learn. It's one of the reasons why we chose it. And I provided a link here to the website for W3 Schools that gives an introduction to JSON. And after that, you probably want to study some of the existing view definition, view configuration, event assignment files that we provide. And that's going to be in the directories mymatches/database/display. And you actually see directories underneath there for those three different types of files. Anything that starts with the word Athena are files that we control ourselves. You don't want to edit those files because they could get overwritten in a future version of Orion. So when you do go to compose your own files, make sure to create new files and give them a unique name. Next, you're going to want to study the online documentation for Athena and the view configurations, view definitions, and event assignment files. We do provide extensive documentation online. We are working to actually even improve that documentation, but you are going to want some time to study that documentation. And you're also going to need some time to construct, test, and experiment. Don't expect to get this working the first time that you compose your files. It is going to take some experimentation on your part, but that's okay, because the goal is for you to construct the files specific for your range needs. And that's just going to take some time to do. And the final part of this that I need to emphasize, it harps back to the shared responsibility model that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And what that means here is we here at Fusion Technology can only build the tools. It's your responsibility to go out and build. So with that, here are the tools that you need to configure the MM100 specific for your own range's needs. Go out, have fun, let's see what you can create. With that, that is everything that I wanted to present today. Thank you for joining us. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact our offices using either the phone number or email address listed in front of you, or you may visit our support website at support.orionscoringsystem.com. Again, thank you for joining us.